Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel and welcome to the January 𝐷𝐸 compilation. This month we had questions about whether you can continue to dive with a rather bad bruise, whether you can use long fins for scuba diving, comparing digital and analog compasses, and which brand gauge you can fit to your regulator. So Rudiger B says, I hope you can, or may, because medical question, help here. Situation, dive buddy on liveaboard falls over his tank when assembling his equipment and hits his big toe. He could no longer do this particular dive because of the pain. However, he then got a bloodshot toe, not broken. No one could tell if a so-called blue spot was a problem with diving. Do you have any experience there? Yeah, so as you say at the beginning, I'm not a doctor. This doesn't count as medical advice. I have done some pretty advanced first aid courses and I've taught a few first aid courses, but yeah, I'm not a doctor and I don't know all the ins and outs. This is literally all I have for this case study, but I'm basically just going to turn this into like a broader discussion, shall we say. So if you have anything to say, anything to add, if you've stubbed your toe or whatever, then yeah, let us know down in the comment section. As far as my personal experiences, something similar happened to a buddy of mine. He, and this is why we teach you to hold weight belts from the non-buckle end. He did the opposite. He was an instructor and he was just about to teach a course, picked up his weight belt and one of the lead blocks slipped off of it right onto one of his toes. That hurt like the dickens. And I think he continued the training dive. It just hurt a lot. I myself, I've stepped on a rusty nail between dives. That sucked. It's kind of fine for like the first half an hour and you think you've got away with it. But then after half an hour of finning, it starts to ache. And then you start to try and fin like one-legged, and therein lies the main like problem. I'm less worried about decompression complications, more about like mobility issues, because another time I stubbed my toe on a dive. It was a beach like resort. Everything was sand between each of the buildings, and they thought it would be a good idea to coat their like steps up into the buildings sand colored. So me not paying attention, just in like flip-flops or something, stubbed my big toe, basically toe punted a concrete block. Yeah, that really hurt, and it was a bit of a bloody mess. Nothing broken except the skin, so I had to like bandage it up between each dive, and yeah, it kind of sucked putting your boots on, and then once you're in the water you think everything's fine, you're going for a while, and then after a while, of course, once the salt water hits it, that sucks, but you kind of ignore that after a while, and then yeah, about half an hour, 3/4 an hour into the dive, then it just starts to ache and it's just kind of annoying. But if you now can only swim one-legged due to the pain, if there's an issue, not just with you, but with your buddy, now you are responsible for them. Could you get their unresponsive, unconscious body out of the water one-legged? If it sucks just hauling your own body weight out, try and do it with a body that's like non-responsive. So that's where my main worry is. So I would always recommend to err on the side of caution and just skip the dive. It sucks, especially on like a liveaboard. You've paid a lot of money and you've done all of that traveling to go somewhere really nice, and you're so close to doing what you love to do that yeah, you can't, unfortunately. It's one of those things where yeah, I don't think it would affect your decompression illness. If there are any like medical experts, by all means let us know down in the comments section, but I don't think I've ever come across any kind of situation where like a stubbed toe or yeah, a cylinder dropped on the toe has created some kind of decompression complications. The most that I can think of would probably be like masking, but it's like, or your big toe is bruised, which is a sign of decompression sickness, pain in the extremities. Could it be masking other signs or symptoms? Maybe. And would the pressure affect the swelling or anything? Again, it's another kind of maybe, but probably not. Again, not a medical expert, but would it affect your decompression? I don't think so. The amount of blood flow in and around should be fine to clean up any excess gas and prevent bubbles from forming. However, it's one of those kind of maybes where it's just easier just to skip the dive or dives and just err on the side of caution, come back another day. Yes, it sucks, but these things, they do happen from time to time, and your health, and like every other diver in the water, their health is more important than you experiencing or potentially experiencing something. So yeah, I would just kind of chalk it up to, hey, pay attention, don't trip over anything, and always try and protect your feet, and yeah, never carry anything particularly heavy over bare feet. So Rob Carr says many dive guides on liveaboards in the Maldives use freediving fins. What's your view on using them? So when scuba diving, we typically use fins more akin to this. This is a fairly short fin. We call this a vented, like a tech fin, and this is built for like all-purpose scuba diving, basically. Open heel, spring heel strap is the modern standard, and a relatively short blade. Now, when you compare that to a freediving fin, much longer, and they're built for efficiency and what I typically think is like straight line speed and efficiency. The benefits are, yes, they are more efficient in the water. However, whilst scuba diving, because we're not just gunning it straight line speed, there are some downsides to them, especially for traveling divers. The first one being, they're big. Trying to pack that in a suitcase isn't easy. And granted, you can separate some designs. You can take this blade out and you're left with the rubber foot pocket, and then you just refit them when you're at the other end. I say just refit them. It's not an easy maneuver, because this section is specifically designed to be rigid. It continues into the rubber for a fair amount of space, and you're trying to push something, these two things together, the rubber grips onto it. It's not an easy thing, especially when you're in like confined spaces like a dive boat. You've got the little clips as well. These just ping around, and that can be lost quite easily. You need a screwdriver to remove that plate, and whilst other designs may vary and might be a bit easier, it's not the easiest thing. And still, you've got to pack something that size and slightly angled in your bag twice, because you've got 2 feet. So that's something worth considering. And another benefit is no one ever mixes up your fins and picks your fins up on the rack, because no one else has this huge pet. I mean, if everyone started, then yeah, everybody would, and we'd have to start like naming our fins. However, yeah, on the boats where I've used freediving fins for scuba diving, yeah, it was quite good as a dive guide, because you're very identifiable in the water. The guy or the girl with the really long fins, that's the person I need to be following. And now they do come in some pretty funky designs as well, which is quite cool. So yeah, you can really stand out in the water. That's why a lot of dive guides quite like them, and because they're not having to pack them up like once or twice a week, then yeah, it is quite beneficial for them. Somewhere like the Maldives, they're a good idea as well, because it's nice tropical warm water, and most freediving fins are full foot fins. So you're going to be wearing them barefoot. You can wear them with socks, obviously. A lot of them are sized up a little bit as well, so that you can wear a pair of neoprene socks underneath, or like inside. So you do have to kind of like weigh that up whether you're bringing socks, so that you can dive like longer, or if you're finding diving water temperatures barefoot, then yeah, you have that option. One thing with freediving fins is they come in a fair variety. So I would recommend, if you are going to use freediving fins for scuba diving, to use a polymer or plastic blade, because they're pretty tough, they're pretty bulletproof. So if you smack them on something, they're not going to shatter. You can get like carbon fiber free diving fins, which, because they got that carbon fiber weave, if you're and it's a real downside with freediving fins, especially in confined spaces, you've probably smacked someone in the face with your fins before, just using something this size. Imagine how many times you smack people in the face using something this big. Hitting something is not unusual, especially if you're like wreck diving, if you're doing wreck penetrations with freediving fins. Unless you're really good with your like fin control, you're probably going to tap something. And with like carbon fiber fins, they can be a bit fragile to that, and they're much more expensive, so you don't want to be damaging them like that. So a polymer blade I would definitely recommend. They typically come in 3 stiffnesses as well. You get soft, medium and stiff. Stiff fins are just as advertised. They're stiff. Your legs will ache after using them unless you dive a lot. Soft fins are very soft. They'll get you where you need to go, but you're losing some of that efficiency. If you're wearing them all day, fine. Whereas a medium stiffness is that Goldilocks. It's in the middle. You get a decent amount of efficiency, but it's not going to ruin your legs. But yeah, a lot of that efficiency is lost. And they're really a tool for freediving and, yes, straight line swimming. Well, you can obviously corner in them, you can turn around, but if you're diving in like guided groups, then yeah, they become quite cumbersome. It's not something that I would say never ever ever use freediving fins to go scuba diving. They're okay. It's just, it's not what they're best at. It's better if you do get a scuba diving fin. They're easier to pack. You can wear boots with them as well, so your feet are a bit more protected. They're better in confined spaces because you're less likely to slap someone around the face. There's a lot of benefits to scuba diving fins, and while yeah, apnea fins will do the job, it's not really what they're best for, especially for like a traveling holiday diver. So Tom says, I have a question regarding underwater navigation. I would like to ask for your opinion and recommendations on whether it is better to use a traditional analog compass or an electronic compass integrated into a dive computer. Okay, so let's pro and con this. Starting with analog compasses. Pros, they are very intuitive. So you can kind of tell when a compass isn't like working correctly because of the way that the card, the bit that has the arrow on it, the way that it moves. If it's moving a little bit weird, or with some of them where you got like a side window especially, you can see if it's at an angle, so you know that it may not be the most accurate, and you can like reset it as well so that you know that it's pointing in the right direction, it's not getting caught on anything. They're very tangible. So especially with like the bezel on the top, you're the one who's physically moving it, and you kind of have that in your mind, like in the map in your head, that yes, it is more sort of in that direction. And yeah, there's something nice and tangible about them. Otherwise, pros, they never run out of battery. A digital compass, which will be a con later on when I get to digital compasses, yeah, they can run out of battery, whereas this is going to still point north for a very, very long time. And I'm sure there's some like astrophysicist or something in the comments is saying, oh, well, technically, and like the North Pole sort of changes where it is throughout the years, but for what we need it for, it's pretty darn accurate. As far as downsides, the first one that comes to mind is that you get Northern Hemisphere compasses and Southern Hemisphere compasses. And There is a thing where when you're buying a compass, especially now that you can buy them online, you'll often see like NH or SH for Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And whilst they will cover a good like 3/4 of the globe, if you have a Northern Hemisphere compass and you're diving in the very Southern Hemisphere, it might not be as accurate. They're not bad, it's not going to send you in completely the wrong direction. However, yeah, they're not the most accurate. So that is something that you do need to sort of take into account, the like the declination basically, which will be a pro for the digital compasses later on. They, of course, they can be forgotten because it is an extra piece of kit. It's harder to forget your dive computer because that's one of the like the big three, as it were. Your regulators, your BCD, it's hard to jump in without them, and your dive computer because you're thinking, hey, I should be wearing my dive computer, and if that's got a digital compass built into it, you can't forget that like program. However, if you do have a physical compass and you have just forgotten it, then yeah, you can forget it in your kit bag. It is something else to like be clunky, so you've got an extra thing on top of it. So especially if you're like donning your BCD, you can get it caught on straps, it can get tangled in things. It's just something else to wear on your wrist as well. You've got your dive computer, you've got your compass, you've got two things together. So it's just another something that you have to strap on, and it could get caught up in something. Also, if you're having your dive computer and your analog compass side by side, because it's an electronic device, that can affect, because it's producing a small but still magnetic field, it can sway your compass. You can say that for a lot of our dive gear. If you've got a metal dive knife or like a stainless steel dive knife, I think I've had some D-rings set off a compass when it's really pretty close. But all of the metal stuff, if you have a magnetic octo clip, just forget about it. You're not doing any navigation with one of those because they're pretty powerful magnets. So it is good to think about like spreading those kind of things out. But yeah, other downsides, that's about it really. Compasses are fairly, I'd say, bulletproof. They do fail from time to time, especially if you drop a cylinder on them, but they are typically quite tough. And yeah, they don't require any real maintenance. Just give them a soak and a twist from time to time to make sure there's no like salt crystal buildups. Replace the straps as they wear out, but that's kind of it. They are just kind of, once you've got it, you've got it. Digital compasses are clever. The first one is or the first like benefit is that, yeah, you only need one device on your wrist. It will have, depending on the whoever designed the compass section in the dive computer, it will have that compass feature. Some of them have very good user interfaces where you can set a heading and you say, yes, I want to head in this direction, and it will just hold that in its memory. Then when you then go to check it, it will say, oh no, go that way, like 5 degrees or whatever it is. So they are intuitive in that sense to warn you if you're coming off your bearing, and some will do reciprocal headings as well if you want to head straight back to where you started. One big benefit is that declination setting, so you can change where you are in the world wherever you're diving with just a single device, whereas with an analog compass you might have to get like a different module to replace it. But if you're not diving the real extremes of the planet, it's less of an issue. If you spend most of your time around the equator in the tropics, you'll be fine. As far as downsides, the most obvious one is the battery. So yeah, if the battery runs out on your computer, granted your dive is over, but yeah, you don't have a compass anymore, whereas an analog compass will just last forever. Depending on the model, it can be a little fiddly to get to see the compass. There are some manufacturers and some like compass modes that will have the like sheer water have one where there's a little arrow that's always pointing north regardless of what screen you're on. So at a glance, you can see roughly which direction you're heading. Otherwise, you may need to like cycle through some screens to actually get to the compass, whereas with an analog compass, it's there. You can just glance at it and you're good. Another one is, yeah, with the analog compass, you know, it has to stay horizontal. That's harder to tell with your dive computer, because when you're in the water, you might be angled slightly upwards or slightly downwards, and your wrist may not be horizontal. So they're pretty good. They do have a fair amount of tilt compensation to allow for that kind of accuracy, but I just find it easier to do with a compass which is sitting on a pin, so you can tell whether that card is at an angle or not. When it's with your dive computer, it is a little bit harder to know exactly which way is up and which way is down when you're in the water. And the only other thing that really springs to mind is like calibration. The analog compass, it just works straight out of the box. The digital compass, it's not frequent, but sometimes the computer just says, hey, I need calibrating. So you have to do a weird like figure of 8 dance with the computer and recalibrate. It takes like 5 seconds. It used to take a lot longer with compasses. You used to have to like turn it perfectly horizontal until it said yes, and then you'd have to rotate it in another axis, and eventually it kind of got it, or it just said no, go outside and try again. With modern compasses, they're a lot faster to calibrate. But yeah, they're both good. It's really up to you. I personally like an analog compass because I like that. I'm still quite old school and traditional with a lot of things. I like physical gauges and to be able to see that, yeah, it is working and twisting, as opposed to just a number on my computer kind of going. Also, it takes up room on the screen for other information. That might be an issue for you, but hey, depending on like how big the actual screen is, if you've got a large screen dive computer and there's just a small section that just gives you your bearing, hey, that's not the end of the world. However, if it's an entire screen, then yeah, that's a lot of information that you might be sacrificing just to see which direction you're going. However, if you have 2 gauges side by side, then yeah, you can see everything at a single glance. But yeah, ultimately it's up to you. It depends. I'm not fussed about using either. I would never, I couldn't say that yes, 100% only go for analog gauges or vice versa. It is just, I'll use whatever's available to me. If I'm traveling light, I might leave my compass behind. I've certainly done plenty of dives just using my dive computer, and hey, which direction am I heading? Check the gauges, or check my computer, yeah, heading in the right direction. It's fine. Digital compasses are very good. Analog compasses are very good. It's just, yeah, which one suits you best. So Stan says, I just want to ask, can I connect a 𝐼𝐻 Console 2 on my SEAC PX100 or Regulator, and console must be the same brand, thank you. This is a fairly common question, especially with brand new scuba divers, because you've never bought regulators before, and of course you don't want the just the guy behind the counter to just sell them or sell you whatever they're trying to get rid of. You want the best thing that's for you. Now, to answer your question, because I'll get onto why this is a question in a little bit, can you use a different brand submersible pressure gauge on a different brand like regulator set? Yes, that's perfectly fine. Your submersible pressure gauge, and even if you have a console, in your instance, 𝐼𝐻 2 console, which just means you get a submersible pressure gauge and a depth gauge, I believe. The gauges are literally modules that just go into what we call a boot. So that makes little difference. It makes absolutely no difference what brand pressure gauge you fit onto your regulator, because mechanically it doesn't really do anything to the first stage. The high pressure hose, which first of all is a very different fitting, but it's one of the very few universal things that we have in the diving industry, especially the recreational side. This will always be a 7/16 inch UNF fitting, and the high pressure port will always be a 7/16 inch. So whether you're buying like a transmitter, a button gauge, or a submersible pressure gauge on the end of a hose, they all have that same fitting, and you can't mix the ports because they're physically different sizes. And yeah, it doesn't do anything. All it really is just a teeny tiny little hole that leads to the high pressure side of the like diaphragm or piston, so that the gauge can see how much pressure is in your cylinder. Because it doesn't affect the mechanics of how things move, then it doesn't really affect how the regulator performs, and it's pretty static as well. Unlike the interstage pressure on the section that you breathe from, that can sort of fluctuate every time you breathe in, the gas pressure inside this tiny, I mean, granted this is a really short hose, but the internal volume is really small inside as well. The gas doesn't change that much. It eventually does as you breathe that gas down, but no, mechanically it has very little effect on that first stage, and such it doesn't affect the performance of the regulator. So choose the gauges that work best for you, whether it's like size, shape, dimension, clarity, whatever it is that suits you. You can fit it to any regulator. They should have the exact same fitting. That's, as I said, one of the very few universal things that we have. And the same goes for low pressure inflator hoses. A lot of divers, if they buy their regulator, they buy their BCD. The BCD comes with a low pressure inflator hose. If it matches the same brand, great. If it doesn't, it shouldn't have any effect. Again, that's probably going to be a 3/8 inch UNF fitting. The low pressure inflator hose shouldn't have any effect, but where it does come into it, you should really, like, if you buy a first and second stage and then an octo, the octo should match, so like branding wise, the first stage, so that you know that it's more likely to work and be covered by the warranty. So yeah, to summarize, it really doesn't matter what brand submersible pressure gauge, whether it's a single gauge or a double gauge or whatever. Doesn't matter what brand. Obviously the manufacturer would prefer if you use their brand, but if you find one that's got a brighter screen that you find easier to understand, or has certain features that you prefer, that's fine. It doesn't matter what brand first stage it's going onto. Yeah, you can fit whatever brand gauges onto any regulator. The only thing that is important is that your like second stages, especially like your octo as well, they should match brand when you're buying regulators. Any other questions, comments, queries, corrections? Because I've rambled on for a fair amount of time, and I have said incorrect things in the past. Anything you want me to know, let me know down in the comment section. Use this @Spark hashtag if you've got a question, and that just highlights it behind the scenes for me to see. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and check out the Go Diving show that's coming up here in the UK. And I'll pop a link up here in the corner of the screen so you can check it out. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good social media stuff. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.